And I saw some of them were reading the Bible as well during the Chinese military prison. We were detained, but they were throwing them all away when we were sending back to North Korea. We were sent back to the Korean border prison, and they will not allow us to get on the train, even the Chinese police, in case we were running away. And we were on the bus 4 days, because China is a big country. And during those 4 nights, our hands were handcuffed, our legs were tied up to prevent escape. And eventually we were all sent back to North Korea. It was a very traumatizing experience. So I was the only one, in fact, survived from the 18 of us. And these men and women, children, who I experienced the several days together, tried to cross the border into Mongolia. And I can still hear their voice. They were talking to me. You will survive. You have to tell the story one day.
Welcome everyone to this episode of No Longer Nomads. Today we're heading to the Far East. We're going to a place that is shrouded in mystery and control. And it's a place where silence is key. And if you speak out against the supreme leader, you could be killed or you could be thrown into a prison camp. And so this is a nation that is frozen in time. It's been built on fear, starvation, surveillance, silence, and that place is North Korea. It's been ruled for over 70 years by the same bloodline, and its borders are shut tight. And every time someone tries to escape the country, it's incredible to hear their story. So we have that opportunity today. And I believe when someone escapes from that country, the world should listen. And so we have a privilege and an honor to listen to a North Korean defector today. And to tell you what, we just finished the interview and it was going to be about 45 minutes. It went over 2 hours. And his camera went out 4 times. His printer started going nonstop. My doorbell was ringing nonstop. Just distraction after distraction. And clearly the enemy didn't want us to get this episode out. I think it's so incredible. I'm humbled and honored to be able to share this episode with you and truly to call Timothy a friend. This is an episode that is totally worth sitting through everything to hear just his heart and how he was totally restored. To be able to look at all the things he endured through 2 escapes and to find, restoration and to find peace and love. And so it's an incredible story. I wanted to ask so many more questions, but I didn't want to jump in on his story. I mean, I didn't want to mess with that. It was just, as you will hear, it's incredible. So I'd love to have him on another time and really learn more about North Korea. It's always been fascinating to me, but I'm pumped and excited to bring the story to you. Timothy, welcome to the show. It is an absolute honor and privilege to have you here today. How are you doing?
Very well, thank you. Well, thank you for having me. It feels me we are very close between and Texas and Manchester.
That's right.
There's only one place on earth who can have this privilege is North Korea. So I'm so grateful for having this opportunity of technology.
Me too. And I'm so thankful that I get to learn from you, and I can't wait for the listeners to hear your story. But it's just, as I was listening to it, it's just wild, the odds, the insurmountable odds that it is that you are alive today. But please take us into your story. I would love to hear, what was life like growing up in North Korea? What was your childhood like?
Well, it's good to remind that what is today. So we are looking forward to celebrating resurrection of Jesus on Sunday, Easter Sunday particularly. And I was so happy that we were listening to the preaching of Palm Sunday last week. But I can go back to my memory in North Korea, my childhood. Every year today, it's very special day in North Korea. It's North Koreans, a man of God's birthday, which his name is Kim Il-sung, founding of the North Korean communist dictatorship. And he was, to me, growing up in North Korea, he was a god to me. and I genuinely believed he was like my God. And in nursery, we gave thanks to him before we had food. That's what teachers told us to do. And when you start work and you give your bow to that picture frame on our house, in our house, on the wall, it was hanging on every household. They have Kim family picture frames. So I remember my father used to tell me before I went to nursery or before I went to school, son, did you bow to that Kim family picture frame?
Wow.
And then go to school, nursery and school, and then the education in nursery as well, because it's a time where you must have pictures with and you're remembering stories, memorizing things like that. But most of my daily nursery education was about the Kim family. It was a powerful wave where you literally start with your nursery and knowing to learn and understanding, memorizing, thinking, act as the Kim. So in primary school, I loved to wake up early in the morning, even like weekend, go to Kim family statues. Because every street, town, and city in North Korea, you have all across the country, there are over 50,000 Kim family statues. And even in a small village and town, only up to 10,000 people population, and a few Kim family statues, which I often went early in the morning and shining it and sweeping it around, and come to school proudly, told my friends and teachers, and they were clapping for me. So the life full integration, holding that Kim as it was a part of brainwashing education, but thinking of he was my God. When he died, I seriously cried. Actually, I genuinely believed our God died, and I didn't eat and sleep well a few days, and in tears when I asked my father, are we all going to die because our God died? And he told me, no, son, and he's not died. He lives in the heart forever. So he's an eternal leader in North Korea. And now, then he told me, we follow his son, which is the son of God in North Korea, second Kim. And so the story also they portrayed when second Kim was born, and giant and bright star appeared above his house. So that is a story of Jesus. Actually, they portrayed exactly in that way.
Interesting.
Yeah. So as we celebrate, this is good to start. Actually, for 17 years I worshipped the Kim family, and I believed the Kims were my God. And every year, this day, exactly 15th of April, still North Korea celebrated as a big festival. People go to statues and bow to them, and people forced to come to even celebrating this day.
Yeah.
And so on Earth, you and we, although we have time difference, but I wear watch. Watch is one of my favorites. And often I think when I see my watch, but the watch, if I was wearing this watch in North Korea, there would be a different time of life. So on the same planet, some part, how life is so distinguished and different, especially country. I was born in North Korea. What kind of place is this? And I am still raising that questions. So grateful to explore this country through this interview.
Yeah. Wow. So what was life like? You've told me growing up, and I've seen before that it's all you knew. So great people there, incredible people in North Korea. But what was their control? Was there fear constantly that if you did the wrong thing, if you slipped up, you'd get in trouble?
I mean, often, and when I see that some Western media or even social media, which of course, we do not understand this country. You cannot go inside. You cannot see it exactly what life look like on the street, and you cannot speak with ordinary people. As Westerners, you travel, They don't show you everything except for few state-sponsored, like even churches, only for foreign tourists, or that is propaganda purposes to show to the world. But in general, when you look at this country, there is no life you can get what's going on there. So often I get frustrated from Western media or social media. They don't understand, but while they only see a few clips of North Korea's propaganda videos and messages.
Okay.
And earlier you mentioned it is a beautiful country. It's the same planet as God's creation, and there are beautiful mountains and trees. Probably one of the most beautiful mountains in the world is in North Korea. And one day it can open to public for tourists to can come and see around the country when it's freely, totally opened. But I
would love to go. That would be amazing.
I think we are around the same age. We get old together, so we will see that part of the days.
That would be amazing.
Together. So it is a beautiful country. People are just ordinary people as like us, and you see South Korea, the half side of Korean DNA, with same Korean DNA, and where the freedom allows people to express, sing, develop, and where K-pop music and dramas. My boy loves the 아파트, the K-pop song. Jose was singing this song, was on top charts during Christmas period, and it's not only my son. Then I go around the world, I can hear the Korean pop music quite easily these days. North Koreans have the same DNA, but what is the fault line? Why they cannot express? It is because of this, the leaders of the regime controls the country tightly, and particularly the information blockade do not allow anything to exchange the views between inside and outside. And this is the thing, and there is no internet, no phone, no social media individuals can have, or even they have TV, only one channel available North Korean people to access. And freedom of movement within the country. There is no way within towns and villages, cities, you can travel freely. You need to travel permission and documents, or people live outside of Pyongyang. You have to apply for a visa. It takes like sometimes 6 months, or some people do not even granted to travel to Pyongyang. And Google satellite shows how great darkness of this country. Of course, they have not enough electricity, and yet story of starvation continues. What is the traditional Korean people is that often I heard from my grandparents. Koreans' hospitality is very warm. So when strangers knock on your door and they provide them with food and accommodation for a night, and when they leave the house next day morning, give them with lunchbox, even pocket money. So that is in terms of general, the hospitality of Korean people do take and provide, we talk about. But that kind of a beautiful humanity has been fading for long because of over 70 years this regime holding it and control this 25 million population into that locked cage and layered. People cannot even escape today, which I did about 18, 19 years ago. It was a great privilege.
Wow. I would love to build up to that. And so tell me about your family growing up. Were you close? What did your parents do? I'd love to hear about your years with your family.
Well, go back to my grandparents. I did not know my grandmother was a Christian. And my father told me later, and you wouldn't able to share the Christian faith in North Korea, particularly with children. So if you slept any words while you're in school, that caused her family end up in prison. What's interesting is that, just briefly, we go touching this part on religious perspective in North Korea. North Korea completely banned Christianity or any other faiths. Meanwhile, and so this banned means it is a criminalized. So faith is criminalized in North Korea. That is a political prison and crime and treason act. In the meantime, they calls people to worship the Kim family through a state enforced cult of personality. So they say there is no God in North Korea, but North Korea itself has created the Kim family as God replaced within the structural system. So if I briefly go back to my grandmother, who was a Christian, and she come from the revival generations. So in Korea in 1907, there was a great revival, Pyongyang revival, which is the capital city of North Korea today. And so this revival happened after Welsh revival, following Welsh revival in 1903 and 1907 happened, and Christians called it was the second Jerusalem of the East. And many missionaries from America, European countries, and other parts, and one of them was Billy Graham's father-in-law. Was a missionary in Pyongyang that time, and in his church, one of the families attended was Kim Il-sung's mother, who used to attend his church, and she was baptized by Billy Graham, father-in-law, and his Kim Il-sung's father was a missionary doctor, and uncle was a Presbyterian pastor.
Wow!
So all it come from Christian root. And Kim family as well. The first Kim himself, mentioning in his biography, he was baptized when he was age 11, and whole family, when they were running away from Korea during Japanese colonization, they were all continue supported by Christian pastors, missionaries. And so it's very frustrating when we see that religious freedom is totally denied.
Totally stripped.
North Korea. But it is come from where that country and civilization took into process through Christian faith of the generations go back, particularly the Kim family then, who became itself creating this darkest society of North Korea.
What do you think switched there? Because it came, like you were saying, there was people baptized in the Kim family. There were some Christian roots there. What do you think changed? And what a drastic change for everyone to then go from worshiping, after this great revival, to not worship Jesus, but stripping all religion away and worshiping inward and essentially creating themselves as a God figure, as a God to them.
I think the persecution comes massively starting from Japanese colonization, go back to 1910, and many Christians scattered. But when Korea finally got independent, and on the part of the North, which Kim Il-sung, the young man, he was appointed as a leader by Stalin. So Stalin, however, under one of the conditions was that you have to have a communist flag. It means, and you have to convert these religious people to communism. So when he went back to North Korea, 1945, after the end of the Second World War, but having now the support of Stalin. And the first thing he did was try to convert Christians and religious people to communism, but they didn't. So he also started persecuting them, and many Christians fled to South Korea, which many from North Korea, they came to build churches. As we know, South Korea is now second largest country sending Christian missionaries around the world after the US. But here is a very interesting point is that, and before Korean War, there were over 3,000 churches all across North Korea. But earlier I mentioned there are now over 50,000 Kim family statues. So most of these churches destroyed and they built. It's not ironic. And it's not ironic how somehow number of Kim family statues built upon that church sites, including in Pyongyang. There used to be 9 big mega churches. And one of the giant Kim family statue, as we see on TV, and that there underneath used to be church as well. So I often describe this. It is a great spiritual battle there.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
I have a map in my actually room where used to be 9 churches located in Pyongyang, and I held this map because one day Pyongyang should have all these churches back. Need flippable, so that
Amen.
the idols goes back to on the ground, and the God has to come up in this country. So,
That's amazing. So essentially, let me ask you this: how do people today? Are there many believers in North Korea, and is it passed down from generations from this great revival, or I've heard of weather balloons getting launched in with USB drives that have like the gospel and things like that on them. How do other people find different faiths if it's not passed down? Is it through media? Or is it, hot wiring channels into radio channels into North Korea? How do they get access to this?
I think we probably know, you and I, regarding we are modern generations, but faith is never destroyed. It cannot be destroyed. So even Western countries go back hundreds ago, that persecution between even Catholic Protestant. But on each way persecution, in the midst of suffering, the faith still kept. Paul. We know who he was before became Saint Paul, and also after Jesus crucified, as we're talking resurrection of Jesus, the persecution early Christians was a massive. And wherever they gathered, Romans come to arrest them or kill them, executed, which is exactly the same situation in North Korea today happens. That's what and there are underground Christians, when the church is all destroyed, when persecution massively went, many of them who fled. However, those who couldn't flee the country, all these churches now went underground. So, and as I earlier mentioned, my grandmother, who had kept the Bible, my dad said it was very, very old Bible, even written some of words, mix of Chinese characters. And she was hiding it, and time to time she went outside early in the morning, and which my father felt she was a spy at first, which then followed and discovering she was praying there. But they were not only my grandma's case; there were many. And people who come from escape from Pyongyang, they actually saw when they discovered they are Christian, now they put them on public trial. And they let them stand on public square, and lots of people gathering there watching them. They say these are the spies of who believes and become spreading some strange kind of things. So they make them public trial and send them to prison camp, which they cannot come out. Exactly what Hitler used to operate. Wow. So, and these generations of revival, there are still remains and still underground. And now, as you can see, the generation, if it was my grandmother, now I'm the 3rd generation. And you can imagine there are how many there could be more. But modern evangelism, however, also has been happening. And since people started escaping 1990s.
Oh, wow. And so that leaked out. Wow. So let's get back to your story here. I'd love to hear. So your grandma is a believer. She's got a Bible. Tell me about your parents, and then also, did you witness a lot of these public, crimes and all that as well at a young age?
That is a common part of, if you ask any North Korean and escapees, at least one or two, or at least a few times they witnessed something that public crime or even public execution. That is very ordinary thing. And to anyone lives in North Korea. This is one of the things why North Korea has been severe try to crack down border and try not and prevent anyone to escape to outside, because of the news is going outside, testimony is going outside to the world. And so because of these North Korean escapees, we have been able to put this report and finding more inside information in North Korea, what's going on. And what part I didn't know during my time in North Korea, although we never thought we were able to leave the country. when I was in North Korea. So we born without kind of passport, and there were a few times I saw in my village whom visited their family members in China. So China is a communist country and quite a lot shares with North Korea. Even during the Korean War, they support the North Korean side, and so I don't know about this time. When I was there, North Korea allowed them to visit China few days, and because it was during economic recess, millions of people died of starvation that time. So people who can get support, aid from China, from relatives, they can go to China and come back within few days. So that was the best part I only saw so far. But we don't understand. We didn't have the perception of a passport. And also from the young age, you are being so told to not to be shared, to be quiet. Anything you saw, heard, you have to be silent and block your ears and close your eyes. So the silence culture itself is a surveillance culture in North Korea. We use this word, and surveillance culture is very severe in North Korea. You don't share anything with what you heard and from your house. The parents first thing teach you have to be quiet outside. These things, and often. And you could see actually all of come to school and you hear, oh, one friend didn't turn up school, but his whole family been taken away. But one black car arrived at their house and took all the family away. It means they were taken to prison camp. That's the very common enforced disappearance. Is very common thing in North Korea. So, but until my parents escaped, and I still was quite surrounded by the love of my parents, who were teachers in high school, so very respected family, and they all town knew who my parents were and who I was, and so it was a kind of a normal childhood pattern as well. A little while I had go to school and come back home. And doing homework, watching cartoons, again, always about Kim family cartoons.
Yeah. Wow.
And so I was already fully embedded into this brainwashing education from a very young age, and coming through this stage, but from primary school, and when I saw that hunger was a happening situation, and after a few years going through the hard time, then my parents escaped. Now I was seeing the real situation inside this country. So parents had to leave the country due to political persecution, not because of religion. I don't think my parents were Christian, or there were no chance they would become. But my father was a history teacher, and teaching history, something is not true. Because you have to tell them brainwashing the generation. Always it's a propaganda education. And distorted, and he had the conscience that he couldn't lie to them anymore. So eventually, that's what caused him. Something happened to him, and he decided to leave the country. And I left behind it because it was dangerous for her family to take that journey. And the upside down life came. And from that moment, I lived a couple of years and experiencing living on the street and begging food, and where I saw probably everywhere you go around that time there were full of homeless people, and on the market, train station, on the bridges. Whatever public space available, you could see homeless kids sleeping, covering newspaper. And sometimes you discover them died of hunger, or in wintertime is frozen and to death. And it was a tough time. And from age 10 as well, I couldn't go to school because now I also realized the systematic persecution of this country. And my father escaped, so I was given son of traitors tag. It means now I was in the criteria of enemy class. So they have this enemy and hostile class where families of escapees, or if you have any families outside, or if your families don't done such any crimes, then this all links to blacks don't follow them and put them into category of enemy class. Which case I couldn't go to school from age 10. So that was a painful part because I loved to do study, which I couldn't go to school anymore. And I'm barely able to even read, and which I often collected the part of people smoke. When they smoke cigarette, because they usually roll the cigarette with newspaper. And when they finish it, the last part of it, there are a few parts left, words you could read. This was during the homeless time also, where you can access a few things could read. It was really hard to find anything to read. And so it's one of my obsession these days, and my wife often complains that I got a lot of books. Whenever I go the charity shops, it makes me crying out. There's so many books people don't want to read. I want to load them into container, take them all to North Korea one day. And also pen. Yeah, I often collect pens as my hobby, and because the pen was very expensive in North Korea, you couldn't get easily to do study.
So you were 9 years old and your parents fled. Was it a shock to you?
Well, it was full of scary. And yeah, you had the breakfast with them in the morning and afternoon you came and they were gone. You could not almost believe it, that they were no longer there. And it was scary, and thinking of I didn't know what to do. Yeah, and it was a difficult time as well. And they might thought I could go and live with my relatives, which I went to my uncle's house. But because of hunger was going on all across the country, and any extra person come to their house, it was very difficult for them to equip. And I remember my 4 hours on the train and arriving at my uncle's house and entering his house. I saw corn bread and soup on the dining table. Was relieved, able to eat, thinking of what I could eat. But he didn't even ask me if I were eaten or hungry. Over 40 minutes I was sitting there and left his house in tears, which I went to the market and begging food on the street. And I don't blame them. And millions of people died of starvation during that time. So we often say that, well, I'm not interested in politics, but we do not realize how significant our political leaders doing a good servant politics. This is why I particularly speaking out a lot when I speaking at churches and Christian groups. We Christians must continue to pray for our political leaders. If they doing incorrectly, we have to pray for them to do correctly in a right way. And that's what North Korea happens. Someone took this wrong directions. Certainly, he could choose right directions, but he denied to do that and put into whole country and people into isolation. Because a servant means you put these people first before your own heart. But the family of this totalitarianism, and they didn't choose and kill the millions of people, and still happens and remains the darkest in this country.
And it's heartbreaking, absolutely heartbreaking. So you witnessed just atrocities on the streets, and how did you get food?
Sometimes you can eat, sometimes you can't. So, or and you learn as you grow. Then you learn how to help out people who need the extra hands.
Yeah.
And then they give you a couple of portions food, or carry the heavy luggages, and give some food. But I don't know those who I lived with begged, still alive. I hope they would. Whenever I talk about during those 17 years of my time in North Korea, was that it was I think it was people, and you can't forget them. So that's why and every interview and every public speaking event I attend or testify, and that's my hope, able to see them one day, those who still live there, and these are beautiful souls of God's creation.
It's amazing. Yeah. Wow. So take us into what happens next. So do you then decide I need to get out of here? At what age were you going, okay, I have to leave? It's time for me to try to leave and flee North Korea.
Still, it was not part of my plans, leaving the country. But age 17, every boy, every man joins the army. It's compulsory in North Korea. Man has to join the army for 10 years. So 10 years. That's the part of what North Korea today have 7 million armed soldiers and 1 million standby army. And some of them are in Russia today, fighting, joining Putin's illegal war, fighting against democratic people of Ukraine. It makes me really sad. But also we have to know it's not their will. They are forced to go to the battlefield. Yeah. Not their choice. And so I also tried to join the army because I didn't have parents. I thought my life could get on joining the army. But went to military office, they told me, your father betrayed this country. We cannot let you join the army. So it's a national service. Everyone can join it. But even that.
But you could not.
No. And they told him to go to coal mine. So the coal mine is often, particularly if you are in the enemy class group, they are being sent to one of the worst environment coal mines where you have to crawl into the cave, digging coals out. But often these young men and women, their arms and legs amputated or killed during the mines are collapsing. And wow. So that was quite ringing my ears. What I was thinking then, even if I married in North Korea, have children, my children would have continued to carry out this crime tag because their grandfather did. And so I did receive. My children would be born with this crime tag. And they then would be born with a complete discriminated society. Yeah. So that's when I was leaving this country, escaping to China. But I didn't realize it was going to be another part of the journey. What I didn't know, not know anything about outside North Korea, was different country I'd never been, and you barely heard anything what was going on there. So it was a full scary actually to first time kind of leaving the maximum I went around within the province, and now crossing the border into another country. It was quite scary. But also we knew that when you leave the country, escape the country, you cannot come back because the treason act would come to you. Now it's the way you could be killed. So crossing the border, it was the actual last choice and decision making it happen. And between North Korea and China, it's a 2-month river where you can swim or walk, depending on which path you are approaching. And the other border you have with Russia, but it's very a long way, and also language in that part of the border, you're not able to communicate. But with China on the border with North Korea, they're the Korean ethnic part of Chinese people, which they also speak the Korean language. So I crossed the border with one family, and so it was we successfully crossed the river and in half an hour. We're lucky because if you were discovered, you would be arrested or sometimes even be killed, which many have been killed and arrested during their escape. And arriving in China, looking back, the part where I come from, North Korea, it was very strange feeling that you would cry watching now from beyond the other side. And I was thinking how long it would take for me to go back to this country, which until today, I can't go back to North Korea.
Yeah.
The couple of very shocking experience I had in China. The first part was that I approached and hours we walked and the groups below and I walked and approached the Chinese market, city market. And because we saw the very shining light from far away, so follow the light.
Okay.
It was strange because first time I saw the spinning very bright light like that in North Korea. As you saw it, you see the Google Maps satellite shows very dark. It's true actually, don't have electricity in North Korea. And from the border side, always the other side is China. They have electricity. We had lots of questions, Mark, often. But now I actually saw in the middle of standing on the market, and the light was spinning around, colorful light. And then this was a different world. It was about 2019 and 19 years ago. You can imagine, still less developed China, but economy was booming. And no hunger story, and also people were wearing all in different fashions. That was fascinating. First time I saw people having different color hairstyles, wearing jeans and dress, high heel. This was a different world totally, and delicious food on the market. And that moment I was thinking, wow, 17-year-old, I never seen those things. I was thinking North Korea was teaching me and the best country in the world because it led by the Kim family. But that was not right. So that was my first picture of experience in China. Second picture of shocking was that I met a Christian missionary guy who approached and wanted to help me. So, and during that time, there were a number of Christian missionaries went to the border
to China,
and if they easily recognized when North Korean boys and girls escaped because the outlook where they lack of nutrition, you can easily recognize they from North Korea. So and this man approached me and he wanted to help me, which I felt strange, particularly when he said he was a Christian missionary. Why he would help me? A lot of questions it came to me that moment. But then when I entered his house, the first thing I saw was the cross. The cross was on the table, and Bible was on the table, and few North Korean orphan children in this house. And I was thinking, this Christian missionaries kidnapping North Korean children and taking their blood and organs out or sell them into human trafficking. That's what I thought.
Oh, wow. Because you're a Christian, you think,
exactly. So
terrible
this
infidels.
This is a part of brainwashing education. Two types of brainwashing education in North Korea. One is brainwashing you to think, act, speak as the Kim, and regard Kim as your God. Second part is anti-Christian education in North Korea is very, very severe. So when I actually saw that cross, I literally thought it was a curse. And the Bible I saw, my legs were shaking. And I believed even if I touched that cross briefly, my finger would have rotten or cursed right away.
Wow.
And children were there. They were kidnapped. Soon they would be killed or sold in somewhere. And so when he was offering food, I didn't eat. And as I was thinking, he put sleeping pill in the food. So if I fall asleep,
Yeah.
I would just wake up in human trafficking. So I escaped. So it was a safe house. We're lucky. Most of these 34,000 North Koreans we have been supported by Christian missionaries. Most 99%. We're lucky if we meet with Christian missionaries on the border because they get safely out of us from China. China is not safe. It's not our final destination usually because Chinese government arrested and sent it back to North Korea. That's the fault line where hundreds of thousands are in prison camps today because of these people who have been arrested and sent back to North Korea. And so I escaped from this house, didn't realize it was God's first provision. Eventually, when I got out of this darkest hermit kingdom.
Yeah.
And so my journey continued, and because China was not my destination, and tried to cross the border into Mongolia. Often we North Koreans try to go to South Korea and other countries. If you arrived in South Korea, you would be given Korean citizenship under One Korea policy. They still have the same as what Western Germany used to offer, one united German policy for Eastern Germans.
Interesting.
But very difficult. You have to cross several borders until arrive in South Korea. And I met 17 North Koreans at the border, a Mongolian border, and where we became 18 of us together. There were two families. One family were like 8 people, grandmother and children, grandchildren, and so the whole family was there, and other people, including myself. We became 18 of us, and at night time, the driver dropped us near Mongolian border, and that's why we were promised that he would be paid the money, but he did not go closer to the border. He dropped us off in the middle of the way at night time, and we struggled to find the Mongolian border. And before we crossed into Mongolia, we were arrested by Chinese military. All 18 of us, and they were 4 and 6-year-old children. And I still remember when they were shooting in our way, kids were screaming. And when we arrested 2 sisters, they took out something from their backpack and buried in the sand, which when I asked them later what was it, it was the Bible. They were carrying the Bible in their backpack.
Wow.
And I saw some of them were reading the Bible as well during our the Chinese military prison. We were detained, but they were throwing them all away when we were sending back to North Korea. So we were sent back to the Korean border prison, and they were not allowed us to get on the train, even the Chinese police, in case we were running away. And we were on the bus. They were driving us 24 hours, 4 days, because China is a big country. And during those 4 nights, all boys, we were our hands were handcuffed, our legs were tied up to prevent escape.
Yeah.
And eventually we were all sent back to North Korea, and which I never thought. Well, it was a very traumatizing experience. I could not forget until this day what were happening there.
So tell me about just the shock, and what were you thinking when you were detained and you're getting driven back to North Korea? Were you hopeful that you would live?
I thought I couldn't survive. And I never thought I was going to get out from it, because we were arrested at the Mongolian border, and we would be easily sent to prison camp, or some of them among in our group could be even executed. And especially my father's case of the enemy class, I it was dreadful. I was thinking, from the moment the bus arrived in North Korea, my legs, I couldn't even walk properly. And all 18 of us. And so I was the only one, in fact, survived from the 18 of us. And these men and women, children, who I experienced the several days together, tried to cross the border into Mongolia. And I can still hear their voice. They were talking to me. And one even lady, she was feeding me bread during the transportation on the bus, she kept on saying, "You will survive. You have to tell the story one day." And the word, it came back to me quite after a few years. So we were in North Korean prison, and I don't know where we were taken each different room. An underground prison, it was a detention center. So they need to find the information who helped us to get to there. So North Korea sends even secret agents all the way to even China, or sometimes in certain cases they even kidnapping people on foreign soils as well, or even assassinating, as we saw that, and the chemical weapon used assassinating Kim Jong-un's half brother in 2017 was at the airport and spread on his face, died in half an hour. Or in 2016, there was a Chinese pastor who used to help North Korean defectors crossing the border. He was assassinated by 3 secret North Korean agents, and his body was cut into 3 pieces and hung on the cross. Wow. And there are other cases, assassinated, poisoned, or kidnapped, and there was even a few American missionaries, Korean American missionaries, who were kidnapped in China and taken to North Korean labor camp. And one particular who is now testifying around, he was released during President Trump's first term. His name was Kenneth Pae, who was in North Korean labor camp for 16 years, sentenced. But thankfully, he didn't stay there for 16 years. After a few years, President Trump worked out to get all these detained American prisoners out. Yeah. And thankfully. And so this information is very critical to North Korean regime, because they try to prevent people not able to escape, especially go outside China. And this information critical, so that's why they were all putting us into that detention center. I discovered him dead next day morning. It was very heavy, and he was leaning against my back. But when he died, this body was just like a rock. I never had the experience that actually someone leaning against me, the dead body leaning against me, and the full weight of the heavy pressing down me. I think this was the first I experienced whose body was leaning against me, but it was a dead body. And his body was dragged out of the cell. And I thought I was going to be killed like him. This prison, although I didn't stay there that long, but I saw enough what was going on there. Yeah. And we didn't have names. All these were depressed and looked in fear, did not want to make eye contact with one another. And at night time, you are not sleeping literally, because you hear people screaming and torturing and beating sound. So I couldn't I was sent to my grandmother's house a few days after. But I was also then not able to stand up and sit down properly. And I remember one man texted me after he watched my interview. He asked me, "Why, Timothy, you were not executed during your first repatriation?" And actually, he was rightly raised this question. And I sometimes think of why I was the one released from this prison among those 18 of us. And later I had to carry out this heavy bag, carrying on my backpack, on my back. And I still don't understand why they released me, but that didn't mean they actually completely let me go free. They sent me to my grandmother's house, and the local police was watching me over. They knew I couldn't walk, and I was also badly treated there. And they tried to find out the information, who took us, helped us, the journey all the way from border area to Mongolian border. It's a long journey, actually. So that part, I did not say any thing that who I met and who were there. Yeah. So completely silenced myself. So when I went to my grandmother's house, and there was a woman behind our house, she was knocking on our door every half an hour to check. So the surveillance my house 24/7.
Interesting.
In North Korea, and every town, cities and villages, they have a district number. So every town have like 70 districts. So each district have a supervisor. That supervisor checking doors if any house got a stranger visiting there. And if any of even relatives come to your house, then they knock on your door and ask you what's the purpose you're visiting here. So it's like Hunger Game in that film.
Wow.
North Korea has exactly the same system inside. So this supervisor was keep knocking on the door, checking me out in case I was running away again. So, and my grandmother, who helped me to escape to China second time, which I had asked her, and she did, and I had to leave home at midnight, 3 a.m. in 3 days actually. So I still couldn't walk properly. The lady from my village, she helped me cross the border to China, but this time it took me crossing the river 2 hours because I couldn't walk. And the lady tried to help me, but was holding the plastic containers floating on the water and drawn into water a couple of times. And she was still encouraging me, you have to survive.
So what time of year was this? Was the water
it was
cold? What's the temperature of it?
It was in August. It's rain season. The rain season. And so rain season water is very, very deep and wave is very powerful. You could be easily drawn into water.
Yeah.
And so second time cross the border to China, even knocking on strangers' door, and easily could be arrested because these strangers, if you report it to Chinese police, they get money award for reporting North Korean escapees. But even that stranger was looking after us, providing us shelter, cloth, and mobile phone able to use. So I was able to get some treatment in China and continued on my second journey in China. This time I went to Shanghai. The plan was going to American school in Shanghai. We thought they could help us to get out from China.
Okay.
I met a North Korean woman, and so we were 9 of us. Together we traveled to Shanghai, and we crossed over the fence of the American school because we don't have a passport. You have to cross over the fence.
Oh, wow.
It
Okay.
was quite high. And the youngest age was, I think, 10-year-old girl. I was helping her. And because of that, I was my speed was being delayed, and Chinese police was dragging me down from bottom of the fence. And so thankfully we managed. All 9 of us went to the school, and school was panicking. It's international school, primary school students coming out and screaming.
Yeah.
And we had a paper written, "We're North Korean refugees, please help us." So
You guys wrote this sign?
Yes, we had
okay.
someone who helped us to get to Shanghai. He gave this paper and told us, when you go there, just show this paper all around school. They would help us.
It's incredible that to help you, man.
Yeah. And these men, and they risk their lives during what
truly.
they are doing, and as a Samaritans actually. School principal tried cameras, and he said that he was going to speak to someone. Probably he rang the U.S. Embassy in Beijing, and then came back to us. And we cannot provide you any space here because it is a public school, not diplomatic center. And so he allowed the Chinese police in to school and dragged us into police vans. So quite many Chinese police arrived at the school and forcibly dragged us. And meanwhile, we made human chains to resist being dragged into police vans, and kids were surrounding us and watching us in tears. And that's how we were then sent to Shanghai police station, and now we were sent to Shanghai International Prison. So that was my fourth experience of imprisonment in China. 3 times. Wow. I been to different prisons in China, and 1 time in North Korea. I was still age 17.
Golly.
I lived a life in North Korea until age 17 through discrimination, and surviving. But now I was going through a different journey of surviving and darkness in China. And I lost my hope. Definitely, I thought, it was 99%, 100%, literally, China was going to send us back to North Korea a second time. And if it happened, we would be not questioned. I could be the best example executed in front of many young people.
Absolutely.
Especially because I went to American school. America is North Korea's greatest propaganda enemy. It's one of the reasons the regime lives and survives today. And while I was crying every night in this Shanghai International Prison, I had 7 inmates in my room, all from different countries because it's international prison. But then one guy came to me. He was a South Korean gangster. He looked very creepy guy, and you wouldn't want to even come any near.
You didn't want to mess with him.
and he, thankfully, we speak the same language, and so that's why he came and asked me, "Why do you cry and not eating eating well?" All these inmates are very curious. They got lots of questions for you because first time they see someone from North Korea. And I told him all my situation, what would happen to me. Then he translated my story to those inmates. And all these inmates, when they first heard my situation, the first response to me, they said, "We would pray for you." What's strange was that they're all from different religion. There was a Japanese guy, I don't know what religion they have. Colombian guy was a Catholic, and Chinese guy was Buddhist. An American young man, he was a Christian. And there was a Malaysian guy, he was a Muslim guy.
Wow.
And this South Korean gangster, he said he was a Christian too. And all they were turned around, they were praying for me in a different way. But this South Korean gangster, he brought something with him and told him to read. It was the Bible. The Bible I ran away during my first escape. I thought he was a mentally crazy gangster I met. I just told him I would be sent back to North Korea and would be killed. And he was telling me to read the Bible. And then he suggested me to pray to God for my survival. I still remember I looked at him with strange eyes. Man, I'm going to be killed. You telling me to read the Bible and pray to God. But the moment of that, I was thinking what I could do in that darkest and terrifying prison cell. I couldn't do anything. Yeah. So it was nothing to lose, to be honest, for me, to pray to God for my survival. So that encouraged me to pray to God for my survival, but I didn't even know who God was by then. All I knew, the man who was forcing me to worship 17 years, that's why at one point I thought it was my God. But I didn't know how to pray to God. So I asked the gangster, how do you pray? And the gangster told him, you just say Amen at the end of your wishes. So that's it, how he taught me how to pray. So the first sentence came to me was that, God, I don't want to be killed. Amen. So that was I first ever prayed to God, was I didn't want to be killed. And all it came to me was desperate and with my current situation, and I didn't want to be killed. I saw a different world. I didn't want to go back to North Korea. All it came from my heart, the desperate situation of the world. I didn't want to go back to North Korea. I mean, I want to get out from this prison. I mean, it was very simple prayer from my heart. And I prayed many times a day. And in fact, I literally had hundreds of Amen lists. That it was from my heart. All I wanted to survive. Yeah. I don't know why I desperately wanted to survive, but that all turned out to God. Yeah. And 17 years you lived in the darkness and you saw different lights first time. You saw people wearing different clothes first time. And delicious food. And the world looked different. Yeah. And I would do anything to prevent myself not go back to the darkest prison, especially the death was waiting for you. And I every day I prayed so many times a day. And weeks going on, nothing was happening. And I said to gangster, well, God doesn't exist, he lied to me. And the gangster told me he didn't say anything to me. So time was ticking and I changed my prayers and I was doubting God was existing. And so I asked God that if he was really exist in this world, you give me my freedom, then in return, I would give all my life to you. But if I was sent back to North Korea and I was killed, I said to him I was going to deny his existence. I don't know what came with my heart while I prayed like that. Yeah. But I wanted to bet everything what I had into what I was praying to, whom I was praying to that moment. It was a kind of holding the rope, and you don't want to fall off from the rope because the death was waiting underneath. And several weeks going on, now 2 men visited me in the prison. I thought they were from North Korean embassy taking me back to North Korea. And I couldn't even walk properly going downstairs. And
still in lots of pain.
Well, and also thinking about sending back to North Korea. Well, that was terrified itself. But outside of the prison, 2 men were smiling at me from a faraway distance, and he told, and it turns out both of them were diplomats. One was a South Korean guy, the other guy was a Westerner. and they told me, Timothy, you have good news that Chinese government decided to deport you and your group to the Philippines instead of North Korea. And I almost doubted because it never happened. Or we were literally the first and the last ever case happened. These diplomats explained to me was that. So one of the school students from Shanghai American School, I think she was about 12 or 13-year-old. She wrote an email to a journalist. I mean, can you imagine 13, even if she was a 13-year-old, what would you think your age, what kind of heart prompted to do that kind of action? Especially you're young, you don't know much about things. But this young student wrote an email, which is still on Google. I discovered it when I arrived in the UK. And she said we were traumatized watching them being arrested by Chinese police, and they were beaten up as well. But we were young and powerless. We couldn't do anything. And would you please do something? And they would be killed if they sent back to North Korea. And along with her letter, email, and the school made a statement as well. So this journalist now encouraged the Washington Post and CNN, the BBC, and the whole international media to join the campaign to press on the Chinese government. And at the same time, those Christians human rights groups who watched the news, they protested in front of Chinese embassies or in many countries. So I often think nothing is a coincidence. When I was kneeling before God in the darkest prison cell, and in the middle of my prayers, I felt it was nothing happening because I wasn't hearing anything. Later, I was discovering that something was going on all around the international campaign organized. And so this was the first time when I hearing this story, and I felt there was someone thinking of me, someone was doing something for me. And even through reading the Bible in prisons, I didn't understand a lot of these scriptures because it was very olden days translated version of the Bible.
I see.
But John 14:18, it came to penetrate into my heart. I will not leave you as orphans. I will come to you. I think this verse probably not was only for me. At that moment, I thought it was for me because I always thought I was an orphan.
Yeah.
And I will come to you. It's possible we all could be in that context of God would come to us, would never abandon us. When I came back to prison cell, I shared the good news with the gangster. And the first time he was crying. And all these men, they were cheering, clapping, and they said, we're going to pray for you again. And then they turned around, were praying for you again. Muslim, Buddhist, and Catholic, Japanese, strange, even religion, they had their own religion. Yeah. And Christian, all it came to pray literally was one God, although they were praying in a different way of their act.
Yeah.
And they said, we're going to have a party. So we took out all the snacks we had, but we didn't have champagne. We had milk, however, so we put milk as a champagne. These men, they were criminals. And so I spent several weeks, these criminals, all from different countries. And they had a prison bank account because the family members sent money to them. As international prison, they could do shopping every week. But I didn't have any money because no one was able to send me anything. But they were going around, rotating each man, looking after me, buying my extra item for me. So in my section of that, in the prison room, small room, where we keep our personal belongings, my side always had more snacks, sweet bread, milk, because these men were looking after me.
They're taking care. What an incredible picture. Yeah.
So it took me a while actually to realize that although I felt I was left behind, however, I was not left behind actually. And each moment I was there alone, there were men and women who were next to me, even on the street. And during the first time crossing the border, second time, and my grandmother was there. I remember one time she was holding me and in tears she was screaming. And even your mother left you behind, then why I had to take care of you, you know? But then she still came back to me, and first escape all these 17 men and women and children, and second time again these 9 and 8 North Korean women, and even in my own prison cell, now I were with these men surrounded by their love. So the miracle I witnessed until this age of my life is that, and how God was working through his creation, the power of love. Even the 13-year-old girl, she never knew who I was, or I didn't know her either. But what simply she acted with love. Jesus went into her heart and acted. And journalists who received that email, and U.S. government or groups and international media now joining the international campaign. And it took me a while that when I eventually realized there was someone everywhere I moved. Even when I eventually came to UK in 2008, man come to this country with nothing, wearing one pair of shirts. It was everything I had. But this man, today, I'm a very rich man. Not because I have millions of pounds, but I have a beautiful family, home, children, many friends, brothers and sisters. Because of this love and power of love, probably what I am doing and speaking now on the behalf of those who are in this darkness. And we were sent to, deported to the Philippines. And these men, they were banging the prison gate, celebrating my freedom, and asked me for living well in a free society. So we went to the Philippines, and the rest of the 8 women, they decided to go to live in South Korea. And I eventually decided to go to United Kingdom, which I arrived in this country in 2008. What was interesting was that when I first arrived in this country, I've been here for almost 17 years now, I thought I didn't have to pray to God anymore because I had freedom. And God gave me freedom that I asked for. And this was a free country. I literally was thinking I don't have to pray to him anymore. But I didn't realize I was going back again and again. And it was a different journey that I was taking on. And from the moment I arrived in this country, I worked hard learning my English, high school certificate, and 2 universities. But during that journey, I was haunted by the trauma and anger and hatred. The anger and hatred that I kept in my heart for long, from the moment I was left alone. And that was a powerful wave of darkness. It was pushing me to the corner again and again and again. That until the moment I didn't even realize who I was.
Oh, wow.
And that every night when you wake up, you couldn't see where I was. In a prison cell, in China, North Korea, Philippines. I was running away And at 2-3 a.m., wake up at night, I had to run out to the street until I saw the English road sign. I couldn't go back to sleep. That was repeating every day, months. I even thought I was going to commit suicide. Then eventually I was going to kneeling to God again. And I started, when I knelt before him, I literally complained to him because I was so upset. Why you allow me to go through this part of trauma and flashbacks, nightmare again?
Yeah.
And I cried out to him so many times. And why didn't you leave me to die alone among those 18 of us and all those images? I spent time in North Korean prison. The man I saw was executed in front of my eyes. He kept on coming back to me as well, because we were children forced to sit at the front of the crowd when the man was executed. And kids died of starvation on the street. And I ran out to the park over thousands of times at midnight, crying out, and again. But then until and the one moment I saw the man who was dying on the cross, and he was asking God, Father, forgive them. They don't know what they are doing. And I tried to learn a lot. What do you mean, forgive them who don't know what they are doing? And I even had many rebellion questions to that verse, actually. How could you forgive those who beating you, torturing you, and leaving you behind? And every time I cried to God, and the simple answer came to me whispering in my ears were, I love you, son. I love you, son. I thought I was overhearing something. But when it came repeatedly, tens of times, and I was realizing it is God who was speaking to me, but no other words than love. So literally, that what he said, and even he was gone through torture and persecution as a son of God who had the most power, but he chose to be persecuted.
Yeah.
And thinking of that journey I went through, what Jesus had gone through, but he was still preaching the good news and love and humbleness, humility, and forgiveness. And I took the healing course and tried to learn and understanding. And so I was able to literally to forgive my own parents first. And from that moment, the wave, I was able to push away the darkness, which then I have been dealing my mental health in through prayers and with my communication with, I have to say, Jesus. Every time reading Bible verse, I communicate, I speak to him, you know. And no other trauma counselors have been able to help me, except for the prayers, walking, spending time with God.
Wow.
And my family
that is something.
Have been, and also God's first ministry, and have been my great support in this way. But first time declaring, I forgive you in the name of Jesus, that was the first and major resource of now how you can push back those darkness attacking you, hitting you, pushing you to the corner.
So can I ask you, and for those listening, this call has dropped 4 times now, and just so many things on my end, on Timothy's end, and man, the enemy does not want this episode to get out. And so let me ask you this. Were you ever able to find your parents again?
Yes, and I met my father after 9 years, and which the man was standing in front of me. I didn't recognize he was my father, and he was in tears. And I'm in touch with my father. He lives in South Korea, and my mother passed away several years ago. And before she passed away, she actually rang me. She couldn't talk. Her body was paralyzed. She was in a care home for a few years. And her doctor said, your mom had written one question for you. And that question was, son, could you forgive me? So it was her last probed question kept for many years. Yeah. And literally I received that call on a public bus in Manchester. And I told her, Mom, I have already forgiven you. And also I have a different story. Learn English. Now I got high school certificates and went to colleges and universities. Now I'm expecting to work in Parliament in a few weeks. So as she was in tears, she wept, I think, hours. And the doctor said that she was going to die soon, in a couple of hours, but she actually lived 2 more weeks. I think she didn't want to die. Hearing that all, encouraging and powerful and love of that his son lives with a different life. And I also told her that I was going to be married soon, So she really wanted to see her grandchildren.
Oh, that's amazing.
And she passed away on Easter Sunday, actually. Yeah. And I was able to attend her funeral in South Korea. And I still miss her, but it was a beautiful end, I have to say. And it was really a beautiful end, and I was quite happy that. So all I have today is the memory of my childhood with my mom, how I spent time with her. Yeah, and so that God gave me a few English and spiritual mothers, it's a beautiful gift that I now have
absolutely.
few English mothers, and so time to time I text them as well. So it is understanding about love itself. It took me for a while. Even I really fought hard to understand what love exactly means. In fact, my cause it started from that love was taken away. Who were my closest people, who I was always expecting to be next to me, who most loved me. And from the moment they left me, and I started to live my life with anger and hatred. But then later I was going through suffering and seeing what atrocities and crimes and torture, all these, and every piece of act of crimes against humanity, it brought me full of hatred. But because of that, I couldn't see the part of my beautiful creation itself. And I still remember when my first child was born. Well, that was the most beautiful moment I ever seen. Yes, my wife suffered a few hours giving labor of her, but after giving birth and holding her in her arm, that was the most beautiful picture and I ever seen.
It's amazing.
And the picture also reflected me that was my mom as well. When she gave me birth, she held me in her arm and expressed her love. That's how we start God's love. We were created and we were born. And yet in part also this love is challenged by dark side. And this is why love causes hatred and angers and revenge, wars and conflicts, refugees. I think with especially this resurrection of Jesus in Easter, we celebrate, and his legacy left preaching good news and love. And he told his disciples, go every part of the world and preach my good news. I think that must be more and more we need. whether politics heading left or right, the dictators' patterns are same, and Satan's side of blocking people's eyes, ears, mouth, blockade the communication, and tried people not able to understand and see what exactly the work of God. But of course, it is not always able to be there forever, because in part, every history and century, as I have studied politics and myself, revised a lot of understanding of God's work. Yeah. But God's testimony has been there, every part of that darkness. And I have seen that North Korea, 70-something, 6 years in darkness, but they haven't defeated the power of love and faith and hope. That is our great legacy. And I am so good that I'm happy to share my little part of a testimony.
It's incredible. I mean, I'm truly so humbled hearing your story and just at a loss for words many times, because, you know, that it's hard to comprehend what you've gone through, you know, and you're here today and you are filled with so much love and peace, and, you know, you're able to look at those incredibly dark times that you went through, and the Lord, like you said, has changed your mind to all the trauma and things you've gone through to be able to have a positive outlook on life today. I mean, it's truly a miracle and so humbling to even be talking with you. And
please continue to pray for our brothers and sisters in North Korea. And also there are 380 million Christians today persecuted simply for their faith. It's the largest religion in the world, what often people describe. But to me, Christianity, I don't think it's just a religion. And it comes to give me the full picture of my identity. I can't talk about others, but I can tell my own identity. But if we are all in the part of God's creation, that could be our common collective identity, and also what we live for. And love and care for others, continue to pray, and also speak out. It's important for us to speak out against injustice, darkness, persecution. That's what love is for. That's what Jesus did as well. So, and let us remember for those who can have this privilege of what we continue able to worship God and sing Him, read the Bible today in the US or UK and some other countries, but still many parts of the world can have this privilege. Even yesterday in Nigeria, some over 100 million Christians were killed, and in many parts of the world, on every day we actually see that situation happens. But it is we who follow God particularly. I think the justice being held into our heart. We must continue to speak out as our forefathers, the generations of testimony they carried, and they did we do today. So thank you for having me.
Man, it's incredible. Well, as I said earlier, I'm truly honored and humbled to know you, to call you a friend. And I do look forward to climbing that beautiful mountain in North Korea with you someday. My wife loves hiking, climbing, so I would love for her to come as well. But wow. And so thank you, listeners, for tuning into this episode of No Longer Nomads. We release episodes on Tuesdays at 5 a.m. And so come back. We have incredible stories. And so, again, Timothy, thank you for joining. And I would love to have you back on again some other time. I feel like there's so many questions I wanted to ask that we weren't able to get to, just because your story is incredible and I didn't want to take away from any of that. And so thank you so much for coming on. I appreciate it.